The icy waters of Lake Adirondack surged violently into my lungs as I struggled to surface, while the echoes of enthusiastic clapping from the pier above shattered my remaining hope for safety. I am Piper, a 25-year-old valuation specialist who always believed that loyalty to one's blood was the ultimate virtue, until that freezing afternoon transformed my entire perspective on family. My older sister Lily had suddenly shoved me off the wooden edge without a second thought, watching with a twisted grin as I gasped for air against the numbing cold. Instead of rushing to help their struggling daughter, my parents stood there laughing excitedly while my father loudly praised how Lily possessed such great strength for a girl her size. They looked down at my shivering form with utter contempt, casually telling me to be happy for her playful spirit instead of overreacting to a harmless little splash. As I dragged my frozen body back onto the dock, I realized that the $50,000 I had painstakingly saved for Lily's final college years would never leave my bank account. They expected me to swallow my trauma for the sake of family harmony, but they had no idea that by sunrise I would be gone, along with every cent of their financial security. Before we dive deeper into how I dismantled their entitled world, please let me know what time it is and which city you are watching from, so I can see how far my story has traveled. If you believe that no one should ever have to set themselves on fire just to keep an ungrateful family warm, please hit the like button and subscribe to join our community. Your support helps me share these raw truths, so do not forget to turn on notifications and share your initial thoughts in the comments below. Growing up in our suburban household felt like navigating a minefield, where every step I took was measured against the golden light radiating from Lily. My mother Janice possessed a terrifying talent for rewriting reality, ensuring that any bruise I earned from Lily's aggression was categorized as a result of my own clumsiness or sensitivity. Whenever Lily would intentionally break my favorite belongings or spread rumors about me at school, Janice would simply sigh and offer that familiar soul-crushing justification that she was only joking. My father Preston was equally complicit in this dynamic because he viewed Lily as the vibrant centerpiece of our family, while I was merely the reliable background noise. He would frequently demand that I hand over my hard-earned allowance or childhood savings to fund Lily's latest hobbies, claiming that since I was the responsible one, I didn't need the money as much as she did. Our dinners were a silent testament to this hierarchy, as Lily always received the prime cuts of meat and the undivided attention of our parents, while I was expected to listen to her endless complaints about life's trivialities. Even when I started working part-time jobs at 16 to afford my own basic necessities, Preston would find ways to guilt me into paying for the expensive designer shoes that Lily absolutely had to have for her social status. They built a world where my labor was a shared resource, but Lily's comfort was a sacred priority that could never be questioned or compromised. I remember one specific winter when our heater broke, and instead of using the emergency funds to fix it, Preston bought Lily a premium ski pass while telling me to just wear an extra sweater and stop being so dramatic. This pattern of emotional and financial cannibalism became the blueprint for our relationship, teaching me early on that my value was strictly tied to what I could provide rather than who I was as a daughter. Janice once told me during a particularly difficult month that it was my divine duty as the younger sister to ensure Lily never felt the harsh sting of reality. That sentence haunted me for years, acting as a mental cage that kept me working overtime shifts and sacrificing my own dreams just to maintain the illusion of their perfect family life. They never saw the tears I shed in the dark or the exhaustion that settled into my bones as I balanced college courses with high-pressure valuation work just to keep our heads above water. Lily flourished under this protection, becoming a woman who believed the world owed her everything, while she contributed absolutely nothing but chaos and entitlement. My parents watched her arrogance grow with pride, mistaking her selfishness for confidence and her cruelty for a strong personality that would take her far in life. I was the silent engine keeping their ship afloat, paying for the fuel while they toasted to the captain who had never even touched the steering wheel. The resentment began to fester deep within my chest like a slow-burning ember, yet I kept pouring my energy into their bottomless pit of needs because I still craved the approval they so freely gave to Lily. It was a cycle of abuse disguised as family tradition, a relentless grind that stripped away my identity until I was nothing more than a walking ATM with a daughter's face. I didn't realize back then that I was participating in my own destruction by allowing them to treat my boundaries as mere suggestions. 3 years after I launched my career as a valuation specialist, the financial demands from my parents transitioned from occasional requests to aggressive ultimatums that threatened my own stability. Preston had managed to run his small consulting firm into the ground through a series of reckless investments and a refusal to adapt to the changing market. Instead of taking responsibility for his failures, he sat me down in his dimly lit office and explained that, as his most successful child, it was my moral obligation to co-sign a massive bridge loan to save the family home. He painted a picture of our ancestral legacy crumbling into dust if I didn't put my credit score on the line using my childhood memories as a weapon against my better judgment. At that time, I was so desperate for a crumb of his validation that I signed the documents effectively tethering my future to his incompetence without realizing the trap I was walking into. Lily was currently failing her junior year of college, yet Janice insisted that she needed a luxury apartment near campus because the noise of the dormitories was supposedly hindering her academic progress. I found myself paying for her rent, her high-end groceries, and even her weekend outings under the guise of supporting her education. Whenever I tried to suggest that Lily should get a part-time job to understand the value of a dollar, Janice would break into performative sobs and accuse me of being cold-hearted and jealous of her beauty. The irony was physically painful, because while I was eating ramen in my small apartment to save money, Lily was posting photos of expensive cocktails and designer handbags that my labor had provided. I remember looking at a bank statement and seeing that over 40% of my monthly income was being diverted to Preston's business debts and Janice's emergency household expenses. They never asked how I was doing or if I was managing to save anything for my own retirement. Their only concern was whether the next wire transfer would arrive on time. Lily would occasionally call me not to check in, but to complain that the latest laptop I bought her was too slow for her graphic design projects that she never actually finished. She spoke to me with a condescending tone as if my only purpose in life was to serve as her personal benefactor while she pursued her vague dreams of becoming a socialite. Preston started treating our home as a showroom for Lily's supposed talents, inviting neighbors over to brag about her social connections, while completely ignoring my promotion to a senior role at my firm. I felt like a ghost in my own life, a phantom providing the wealth that allowed them to live a lie that I could never be a part of. My friends tried to warn me that I was being exploited, but the brainwashing ran deep, and I truly believed that if I just gave a little more, they would finally see me. I was funding a lifestyle that I couldn't even afford for myself all, while Preston continued to make secret deals that would eventually put the very house I was saving at risk. The pressure was immense, leading to sleepless nights and a constant state of anxiety that began to affect my performance at the office for the first time in my career. I was drowning in their expectations, yet I kept swimming harder because the alternative of letting them down felt like a death sentence to my soul. It was a toxic dance of guilt and greed, where every financial sacrifice I made only served to increase their appetite for more. 6 months before that fateful afternoon at the lake, I accidentally uncovered a web of financial deception that made my previous sacrifices feel like a cruel joke played by my own blood. I had stopped by the house unexpectedly to drop off some paperwork for Preston when I noticed a pile of unopened mail hidden behind a decorative vase in the foyer. Among the letters were several final notices from the county regarding unpaid property taxes and a shocking statement from a credit card company I didn't recognize. Curious and increasingly worried, I opened the statement only to find that Janice had opened a secondary account in my name, racking up over $15,000 in charges for high-end fashion boutiques and luxury spa treatments. My heart hammered against my ribs as I realized my mother had committed identity theft against her own daughter to fund her and Lily's extravagant tastes. When I confronted them in the kitchen, Preston didn't offer an apology. Instead, he slammed his hand on the table and told me I was being an ungrateful accountant who cared more about numbers than family loyalty. Janice began to cry, claiming that she only did it because she wanted Lily to feel confident during her summer internship that Lily had actually quit after only 3 days. The sheer audacity of their entitlement left me speechless as they stood there, two people I had supported for years, telling me that my credit score was a small price to pay for their happiness. Lily walked into the room during the heat of the argument, looked me in the eye, and laughed, saying that I had so much money anyway, that I wouldn't even miss a few $1,000s. That was the moment I reached out to Derek, my oldest friend and a sharp legal mind, who confirmed that I was legally responsible for those debts unless I filed a police report against my own mother. The thought of putting Janice in jail was too much for me at the time, so I foolishly agreed to pay off the debt on the condition that they would never touch my credit again. I also discovered that the money I had been sending for the property taxes was being diverted to Lily's secret vacation fund for a trip to Ibiza that she had hidden from me. They were treating my bank account like a communal well, dipping in whenever they felt the slightest thirst, while I was the one responsible for keeping the well from running dry. I began to set up secret accounts and moved my primary savings to a bank. They didn't know about preparing a safety net for the inevitable day when their greed would finally break me. Despite the betrayal, I still felt a lingering sense of duty to ensure Lily finished her degree, so I set aside $50,000 in a locked educational trust that would only be released for her final tuition payments. I thought this would be my final act of service before I finally reclaimed my life and moved away from their suffocating influence. I didn't tell them about the trust yet, wanting to use it as a bargaining chip to ensure Lily actually attended her classes and stopped her destructive behavior. Little did I know that they were already planning their next move to extract even more from me, viewing my discovery of their theft as a mere obstacle to be navigated. Their lack of remorse was a cold realization that the people who were supposed to protect me were actually the ones I needed protection from the most. I felt a profound sense of isolation, realizing that every "I love you" from my parents was actually a transaction disguised as affection. The afternoon at Lake Adirondack was supposed to be a rare moment of family bonding, but it quickly devolved into the darkest turning point of my existence. We were standing on the edge of a high wooden pier overlooking the deepest part of the lake, where the water remained bone-chillingly cold even in the height of summer. I was leaning against the railing, still nursing a painful shoulder injury from a recent car accident, when I felt a sudden and violent force against my back. Lily had lunged forward with all her weight, shoving me directly into the abyss, with a look of pure, unadulterated malice on her face. As I fell, my injured shoulder slammed against a submerged rock, sending a jolt of white-hot agony through my entire body that nearly made me lose consciousness. I plunged into the dark water, the cold instantly seizing my muscles and making it nearly impossible to coordinate my limbs as I fought to reach the surface. When my head finally broke the water, gasping for air and coughing out the bitter taste of the lake, I looked up to see a sight that would be burned into my memory forever. Preston and Janice were standing at the edge of the pier, their faces lit up with genuine joy as they clapped their hands and cheered for Lily's playful behavior. My father's voice boomed across the water, shouting about how Lily showed such impressive physical strength, and how he loved seeing her so full of life and energy. My mother was nodding in agreement, her laughter ringing out like a death knell to any remaining love I had for her, as she watched me struggle to stay afloat. I managed to grab onto a slippery wooden pylon, my breath coming in ragged sobs, while the pain in my shoulder made the world spin around me. "Help me!" I managed to scream, but Janice just waved her hand dismissively and told me to stop being such a drama queen and spoiling everyone's fun. They turned their backs on me to continue praising Lily, who was preening under their attention like she had just won a gold medal instead of nearly drowning her sister. It took every ounce of my remaining strength to drag my heavy, waterlogged body toward the shore, my fingers clawing at the mud as I finally collapsed onto the grass. I laid there for a long time, shivering uncontrollably and watching them from a distance as they laughed and shared a picnic I had paid for. The realization hit me with the force of a tidal wave. My life had absolutely no value to them beyond the financial utility I provided. I was a tool to be used a cushion to soften their falls, but my actual physical safety was a secondary concern to Lily's fleeting amusement. Preston eventually walked over not to check on my injury, but to tell me to hurry up and get changed, because he was hungry and expected me to drive them to an expensive steakhouse for dinner. He didn't even look at my bruised shoulder or my pale, trembling face, as he complained about how my moodiness was putting a dampener on the beautiful day. I realized then that if I had died in that water, they would have spent the funeral complaining about the inconvenience of the service and wondering who would pay the mortgage. That cold, hard truth solidified into a diamond-sharp resolve in my mind as I forced myself to stand up and walk toward the car. I would play the part for a few more hours, but the person who walked out of that lake was not the same Piper who had walked in. The daughter who would do anything for them was dead, drowned in the freezing depths of Adirondack. 2 hours past midnight, the silence of the vacation rental was only broken by the soft thud of my boots hitting the floor as I meticulously packed my life into 2 heavy suitcases. My shoulder was a dark shade of purple and throbbed with every movement, but the adrenaline coursing through my veins acted as a powerful anesthetic against the physical pain. I moved like a shadow through the hallways, gathering my laptop, my legal documents, and the few personal mementos that hadn't been ruined by the water. Preston and Janice were snoring loudly in the master suite, completely oblivious to the fact that their retirement plan was currently walking out the front door. I sat at the small kitchen table for a moment, my hands steady as I opened my banking app to perform the most satisfying transaction of my entire life. With a few calculated taps, I moved the $50,000 from the educational trust back into my private offshore account, ensuring that Lily's college future vanished into thin air. I also initiated a formal dispute for the fraudulent credit card charges Janice had made, providing the digital evidence I had gathered over the past few months. Then I drafted a succinct email to the mortgage lender, officially notifying them that I was withdrawing my financial guarantee and resigning as a cosigner due to a material change in my circumstances. This single action would trigger a mandatory review of Preston's creditworthiness, a review I knew he would fail spectacularly within 30 days. I felt a strange sense of peace as I clicked send, knowing that I was simply returning the chaos they had inflicted on me for over 2 decades. I left no note, no explanation, and no way for them to track my location, having already secured a lease on a secure apartment in Seattle under a corporate name. Before exiting, I took one last look at the living room, where Lily's expensive designer bag sat on the sofa, a bag that would likely be the last luxury she would ever own. I stepped out into the crisp night air, the scent of pine needles and damp earth filling my lungs as I loaded my car and drove away, without glancing at the rearview mirror. Derek was waiting for me at a designated rest stop 3 towns away. his expression a mix of concern and fierce pride as he helped me transfer my bags to a rental vehicle. He had already prepared the paperwork to file a restraining order if they attempted to harass me at my workplace, though I hoped it wouldn't come to that. We drove through the night, leaving the state of New York and the suffocating weight of my family's expectations behind us with every mile marked on the odometer. I watched the sunrise over the highway. The orange and gold light felt like a benediction for my new life, a life where my worth would never be measured by a bank balance. My phone began to vibrate in the cup holder as the first of Janice's morning texts arrived, asking why the coffee hadn't been made yet and reminding me that I needed to pay for the car's oil change. I didn't delete the message. I simply turned the device off and tossed it into a roadside bin at the next gas station, cutting the final tether to my past. For the first time in 25 years, I was truly alone, and the solitude felt more like a warm embrace than a cold abandonment. I was no longer the responsible sister or the obedient daughter. I was simply Piper. And that was more than enough. The road ahead was long, but it was mine to walk, and I would never let anyone push me off the path again. A full week had passed since I disappeared into the mist of the Pacific Northwest, and the digital silence I had maintained was finally broken when I decided to check my old email account. The inbox was a chaotic battlefield of desperation, rage, and manipulative pleas that confirmed every reason I had for leaving. Janice had sent over 40 emails ranging from sobbing apologies for the lake incident to blistering accusations that I was a heartless monster who was killing her from stress. Preston's messages were more focused on the financial carnage I had left in my wake, as the bank had already begun the process of calling in the loan I had revoked. He demanded to know where the $50,000 for Lily's tuition had gone, claiming that she had been humiliated in front of the registrar's office when her payment was declined. Lily herself had sent a string of vitriolic messages calling me an ugly, jealous loser and threatening to sue me for emotional distress caused by her sudden lack of funds. Reading their words, I felt a detached sense of pity because they still hadn't realized that their own actions were the sole cause of their downfall. They were like children discovering that the world doesn't stop turning just because they've thrown a tantrum. I learned through a mutual acquaintance that Lily had been forced to move out of her luxury apartment and was currently sleeping on a friend's couch because she couldn't afford the deposit on a smaller place. The university had officially dropped her from her courses, and without a degree or any work experience, she was finding it impossible to secure the high-paying jobs she felt she deserved. Preston's business had finally folded under the weight of the audit I had triggered, and the for sale sign was already being hammered into the front lawn of the house they had used me to keep. They were finally facing the reality of the American dream gone wrong, the inevitable result of living far beyond their means on the backs of someone else's labor. It wasn't my job to fix it anymore, and the lack of guilt I felt was the most empowering sensation I had ever experienced. I spent my days exploring the rugged coastline of Washington, the sound of the ocean replacing the constant ringing of my parents' demands in my ears. I had secured a high-level position at a prestigious firm in Seattle, where my colleagues valued my expertise and respected my professional boundaries. Derek checked in on me occasionally, confirming that my legal shield was holding and that my credit score was recovering now that the fraudulent accounts were closed. I realized that by taking the money and leaving, I hadn't just saved my finances, I had saved my soul from being permanently extinguished by their greed. My sister's great strength had turned out to be her greatest weakness, as she had no idea how to survive in a world where she wasn't being subsidized. Janice and Preston were discovering that their favorite daughter was a liability when things got difficult, as Lily was now blaming them for not managing me better. The irony of their household collapsing in on itself was a stark lesson in the fragility of a family built on exploitation instead of love. I was finally breathing air that didn't feel heavy with lies, and for the first time I could look in the mirror without seeing a victim. They were a part of a story I no longer wanted to read, a chapter of my life that was firmly and permanently closed. I was moving forward, and the distance between us was the only thing I truly cherished. 1 year has passed since I stood shivering on that dock at Lake Adirondack, and the life I have built in Seattle is unrecognizable compared to the shadow I used to inhabit. I am sitting in my own apartment, a space filled with plants and books that I chose for myself, far away from the designer clutter of my family's entitlement. My career has flourished, and I recently led a major urban development project that earned me a seat on the executive board of my firm. The physical scar on my shoulder has faded to a thin white line, but it serves as a permanent badge of the day I chose myself over the people who were supposed to love me. I eventually learned through legal channels that Preston and Janice had lost the house and were now living in a small, cramped apartment in a less desirable part of the state. Lily is reportedly working 10-hour shifts at a fulfillment warehouse, a grueling job that she hates, but must keep to help our parents pay their mounting debts. They haven't changed, as they still spend their time blaming me for their misfortunes in local social circles, but their words no longer have the power to reach me or hurt my reputation. I have found a new family here, a tribe of friends and mentors who understand that loyalty is earned through mutual respect and kindness, not through blood and manipulation. I no longer feel the need to apologize for my success or hide my resources to keep others from feeling inadequate. The most important lesson I learned is that family is not a lifetime pass to abuse someone, and leaving is often the most courageous act of love you can perform for yourself. I used to think that my value was tied to how much I could give, but now I know that my value is inherent, and it is not for sale at any price. To those of you who are watching this and feeling the heavy weight of an ungrateful family, I want you to know that you are not a bad person for choosing your own survival. You do not owe your life to people who only see you as a resource, and it is never too late to take back the power you've given away. Setting boundaries is not an act of war, it is an act of peace for your own mind and your own future. Thank you so much for listening to my journey from that cold lake to this place of strength and independence. If this story resonated with you, I would be truly grateful if you could share your own experiences or thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved just to save yourself? Please don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our upcoming stories about reclaiming life and finding justice. Your comments and support mean the world to me and help ensure that these messages of empowerment reach the people who need them most. I genuinely appreciate every single one of you who stayed until the very end to hear how I finally found my voice. Remember that you are the architect of your own happiness, and you have the right to build a life that is free from toxic influence. Until next time, take care of yourselves and never be afraid to walk away from the things that no longer serve your soul. I look forward to reading your perspectives and continuing this conversation with all of you in the community. Goodbye for now, and stay strong in your own